Jakub, congratulations with the impressive study. And really, there is a general understanding that the Kremlin is trying to interfere the policies of various European states. But what new you have managed to prove with this research, and maybe you wasn't managed to confirm something, what are the main findings, what we need to know, what the public need to know?
Well, thank you very much for having me. Actually, this study is an outcome of several months' work of my colleagues and myself as well. And basically, there are several things which we can take away from it. First, that obviously the EU was able to put together the sanctions against Russia's behavior. But right now, we can see that there are, let's say, 11 countries which 11 out of those EU28, which first had the overall experience or knowledge or and expectations of the Russians' aggressive behavior, or that those countries have shifted their policies following the Russian aggression against Ukraine. So those are 11 countries. Let's say we have a small group of 6 countries which, to our understanding, had held the concerned views of the Russian behavior, and that's Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, Poland, United Kingdom, and Denmark. So those countries basically knew it all along. So they were warning against Russia's behavior. And then we have another 5 countries, which has, to our understanding, basically shifted their national policies and strategic documents following the Russians' aggression against Ukraine. And that's basically Finland, Sweden, Netherlands, Germany, and Czech Republic. So those are countries which are now basically on the front line of the response to Russian aggression. Every country is different, so we are not saying everybody is the same, but basically this is the core of the European response to Russian aggression. So those are the key countries. Moreover, if we would be more specific, looking at the threats coming from Russia, there are 13 countries out of those 28 which are pretty much concerned with Russian disinformation and Russian effort to interfere in European domestic affairs. And those countries, let's say, are taking part in several, let's say, international projects which the EU or NATO is doing on Russian disinformation primarily. But still, at the end, this means that those are, let's say, 11 or, let's say, 13 countries, which are the core, which is advocating for more options against the Russian aggression in Ukraine. So, and obviously, there are countries which are very much hesitant, or countries which are pretty Kremlin-friendly, as we would say, which are basically helping out Russian foreign policy objectives sometimes. And that's unfortunately, for example, Greece, Italy, or Cyprus.
And what are the particular policies? What is the Russian strategy? What exactly they do?
They do several things, and to put it very simple, Russia tries to divide and conquer. Basically, what we know is that when those EU countries, even smaller countries such as Czech Republic, where I come from, are faced with dealing with Russia bilaterally, so one-to-one, they are obviously very weak. But EU28 can work pretty well if there is a united voice on this. At this moment, we still have a united voice on the sanctions, even though there are countries which are voicing their concerns. We still have the sanctions running and prolonged. But what is Russia basically doing? It tries to provide specific offers or deals to specific countries to lure them on their side, for example. Or we can see disinformation and influence operations, which are trying to do something what we could call a soft regime change. So, for example, trying to help specific candidates in specific countries, let's say now in France, in Germany, in some other countries as well, to help them be elected. And there, Russia expects that those candidates would be, let's say, pretty tolerant to something what Russia calls a sphere of influence.
Jakub, you have written that the game changer in this situation would be the next German government coalition. And as well, these days we are definitely watching closely the elections in France. So the biggest EU countries, so with UK being out already. So what can you elaborate more on particularly those states?
Basically, if you look at France, we could see that France has been very hesitant in supporting Ukraine or being, let's say, open and vocal against Russian aggression. But still, obviously, France supports the sanctions. So that has been the long-term position of France, let's say. But now, with the presidential elections basically happening right now, there is obviously a lot of question mark because we could have basically a winner who could be basically a Russian Trojan horse. We could really much have if Marine Le Pen would get elected, which still is a possibility. It would mean that Russia would have its one of the most well, let's say. Vulnerable and good friends in Europe, in executive office in France, in the presidential palace, which could mean a lot. But there are obviously other candidates, which are, I would say, Kremlin friendly as well. Or there are candidates such as Mr. Macron, who could be, I would expect, let's say, he would continue in the current French policy, which basically stands behind the sanctions in a way, even though they criticize them somehow. This, for example, what Mr. Macron is saying in his program as well. But they are more or less pretty silent on the positions which are happening at this moment. So I wouldn't expect big changes if Mr. Macron would get elected. But more important, I would say, or let's say at least of similar importance, are the elections in Germany, as you said, and those are because that's basically everything is open because on one side there is a possibility that potentially there could be something what we would call a red coalition. So the Social Democrats with Die Linke, which is the post-communist party, which is I would again say a Kremlin Trojan horse, because they simply copy paste basically anything what Kremlin says. And they, for example, want to get out of NATO as well for Germany, which would be a huge blow if it would happen. I wouldn't expect it would really happen, but this chance is there. And on the other side, we could have the CDU, the current chancellor Angela Merkel, be in charge. And the question is with whom she would form the coalition. If again with the Social Democrats, I would expect that the current position of the German government wouldn't be changing much. Or she could do a coalition potentially with other coalition partners if those numbers would add up. And then she could fulfill basically what she really feels about Russia. And that would be a really principled position on every side of the aisle.
And Jakub, so what would be your recommendations, as that's probably the most important things of a policy paper, where to look at, where could be the major concerns, and maybe you'd be more specific also mentioning some particular states?
Yes, basically we are coming up with 7 recommendations. First, we are saying that the aggressiveness of Russia or Russian Federation is probably not going to go away overnight. It will probably stay with us, unfortunately, for quite some time until the regime in Russia implodes on different reasons. So we are saying this is not going to disappear only depending on what's happening in Ukraine. Second, we are saying that basically we should be, we as even smaller countries in Europe, should be focusing on assisting Germany to adopt the position of the prime defender of the liberal international order, which is something what many people are thinking about. German military is pretty much on the right side on this, even having large capacities done in the Baltic states right now. But politically, it's still pretty hard for Germans to really play this role. So I think smaller countries could help out to the Germans on this one slightly. Number 3, we are saying that it's probably not reasonable to expect that some positions of the Kremlin friendlies, like Greece, Italy, or Cyprus, would be moving. Because we have seen quite a lot of atrocities or even crimes from the Russian side in Ukraine or Syria, and those countries like Greece, Italy, and Cyprus has basically didn't change any of their big policies on this. So we are saying basically probably nothing can move them. Number 4 would be basically saying that we should be looking at how Russia uses energy dependence of some European countries and trying to make it even bigger, for example, with Nord Stream 2 project. And that's something what should be looked through not only energy lens, but also from security and intelligence matters. Because we can see, for example, Russia trying to lure some of the current or former politicians to work on the Kremlin's behalf, as we have seen, for example, with the former German chancellor. Number 5 would be that we are basically saying that European countries should really stand and basically form their own defense mechanisms against hostile foreign influence, because we could see Russia trying to interfere in indirect elections, and that's probably not going to go away, including disinformation threat. So for this reason, every country needs to seriously look into it. Number 6, we are saying that there are 13 countries which apparently take Russian disinformation pretty seriously, and they should ask Federica Mogherini to reinforce the team she has in her service, because it still has only 11 people. So for this reason, it should be strengthened. And number 7, the last recommendation, is basically saying that at this moment, we are pretty much missing the Polish engagement on this field, because Poles have the capacity, have the history. Everybody understands why they are concerned about Russia's behavior, but because of how the current Polish government is behaving in European institutions and internationally, they are not seen as the legitimate leader at this moment. And I think it's a very pretty much wasted opportunity at this moment, because everybody, let's say, including the Italians, would understand if Poland would be the leader of the countries which are concerned with Russia. But right now it's very tough because of how the Polish government is behaving on so many levels. So that's number 7, that we are saying this would be great if this would change, because that would mean that this pack of countries, of 11 countries at least, could have an informal leader which would be well respected because of history, size, and the regional aspects as well.